I think I didn't do anything wrong, just said what everyone was already thinking. But the next morning, a lawyer's letter was waiting on my kitchen table, and my husband had vanished. No note, no call, just cold legal paperwork and silence. The dinner party had been going so well. Cassie Lowe had outdone herself with the roast chicken, and the wine was flowing freely around our little circle of friends. Graham sat quietly at the end of the table, picking at his food while the rest of us laughed and gossiped. That's when Dean Roussel, my charming co-worker, made some offhand comment about bedroom performance that had everyone giggling. "Well," I said, emboldened by the Chardonnay and the appreciative audience, "at least you don't have to worry about disappointing anyone. Graham here is definitely the shortest size of them all, if you know what I mean." I gestured toward my husband with my wine glass, expecting another round of laughter. The silence that followed was deafening. Graham's face went pale, then red. Cassie cleared her throat awkwardly. Dean smirked, but even he seemed uncomfortable. From the living room, I could hear our 6-year-old daughter Chloe's cartoons playing, and I suddenly wondered if she'd heard. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. "Ottilie," Graham said quietly, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Can I speak with you in the kitchen?" "Oh, come on," I laughed, waving him off. "Everyone jokes about their partners. Don't be so sensitive." But Graham was already standing, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Kitchen, now." I followed him reluctantly, rolling my eyes for the benefit of our guests. In the privacy of our small kitchen, Graham turned to face me, his hands shaking slightly. "What the hell was that?" he whispered, mindful of Chloe in the next room. "It was a joke, Graham. God, you're so uptight." "That wasn't a joke. That was humiliation. In front of our friends, in front of—" He gestured toward the living room where Chloe was curled up on the couch. "She didn't hear anything," I snapped. "And even if she did, she's 6. She doesn't understand adult humor." "Adult humor?" Graham's voice cracked. "You just told a room full of people intimate details about our marriage, about me. How is that funny?" I could hear the conversation resuming in the dining room, probably everyone talking about us. The thought made me defensive. "Look, if you can't handle a little teasing, maybe you should work on being less sensitive. Everyone knows couples joke around." Graham stared at me for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "You really don't see anything wrong with what you just did, do you?" "What I see is my husband making a scene over nothing," I shot back. "Now can we please go back to dinner before our guests think we're having some kind of marital crisis?" He didn't respond immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was eerily calm. "You're right. We wouldn't want them to think that." We returned to the table, but the atmosphere had changed. Graham barely spoke for the rest of the evening, and our friends left earlier than usual. After everyone was gone, I cornered Cassie in the kitchen while she helped me load the dishwasher. "Was I too harsh?" I asked, though I already knew what I wanted to hear. Cassie hesitated, her hands stilling on a wine glass. "Maybe a little." Graham looked really hurt. "He's always hurt about something," I said dismissively. I swear, sometimes I feel like I'm walking on eggshells in my own house. But even as I said it, I noticed Cassie's expression. She wasn't buying it, and that made me angry. Graham was being dramatic, as usual, and now he was making me look bad in front of my friends. Later that night, after Chloe was tucked into bed, I found Graham in our bedroom, quietly packing clothes into a duffel bag. "What are you doing?" "I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight," he said without looking up. "Oh, for crying out loud. You're really going to pout about this?" He zipped the bag closed and finally met my eyes. "I'm not pouting, Ottilie. I'm thinking." "About what?" "About whether I want to spend the rest of my life being your punchline." He left the room without another word. I heard the guest room door close with a soft click, and then silence settled over the house like a heavy blanket. The next morning, I woke up alone. The guest room was empty. Graham's car was gone from the driveway, and sitting on our kitchen table was a manila envelope with my name written in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a letter from Barlow & Associates, Legal Services, informing me that their client, Graham Hames, was seeking immediate separation and requesting that I refrain from contacting him directly. My hands shook as I read the formal language, the cold legal terms that somehow made our marriage sound like a business transaction gone wrong. At the bottom, in Graham's neat handwriting, was a single line: "All communication regarding Chloe should go through my lawyer." That's when I realized that my little joke had cost me everything. The first thing I did was call Graham's phone. It went straight to voicemail. The second thing I did was drive to his office, only to be told by a sympathetic receptionist that he'd taken emergency leave. By the time I got to work on Monday morning, I was a wreck, but I knew I had to control the narrative before it got out of hand. "You look terrible," Dean said, appearing at my cubicle with coffee and that concerned expression that had first drawn me to him months ago. "Everything okay?" I glanced around the open office, making sure no one else was listening. Graham left, just packed up and disappeared like some kind of drama queen. Dean's eyebrows shot up. "Because of Saturday night." "Because he can't handle the fact that I have a sense of humor," I said, louder than necessary. I wanted my co-workers to hear this version of events. Apparently, making one little joke about your husband is grounds for abandonment now. "That's insane," Dean said, right on cue. "What kind of man just walks out on his family?" Exactly. That was the question I needed people to be asking. Not whether I'd gone too far, but what kind of father abandons his 6-year-old daughter over a harmless comment. During my lunch break, I drove to Cassie's apartment, armed with takeout and my carefully crafted story. She let me in, but I could tell something had changed since Saturday night. "I can't believe he actually left," I said, settling onto her couch with my container of pad thai. "I mean, I knew he was sensitive, but this is next level." Cassie picked at her food. "Maybe he just needs some space to cool off." "Space?" I laughed bitterly. "Cassie, he had his lawyer send me papers. What kind of person does that? We've been married for 8 years and he can't even talk to me directly?" "Well," Cassie said carefully, "you did embarrass him pretty badly in front of everyone." I felt my jaw clench. "So that justifies abandoning Chloe? She keeps asking where Daddy is and I have to tell her I don't know because he won't even answer his phone." That got her attention. Cassie had always been soft when it came to kids, and I could see her wavering. "He's really not taking your calls?" "Nothing. Complete radio silence. And meanwhile, I'm supposed to explain to our daughter why Daddy doesn't live here anymore." I let my voice break just a little. "I made a stupid joke, Cassie. People say worse things about their spouses every day." By the time I left her apartment, I could tell Cassie was starting to see things my way. The key was making Graham look like the unreasonable one, the man who'd rather lawyer up than work through a simple misunderstanding. But my strategy hit a snag at Chloe's school pickup. I was standing in the usual cluster of parents when I overheard 2 mothers talking in hushed voices. "I heard Graham moved out," one of them was saying. "Sarah mentioned something about a dinner party that went wrong." My stomach dropped. Sarah had been at Cassie's dinner, and apparently she'd been talking. I tried to catch her eye across the schoolyard, but she looked away quickly, suddenly very interested in her phone. When Chloe came running out, her usual bright smile was noticeably absent. "Where's Daddy?" she asked as I buckled her into her car seat. "He always picks me up on Mondays." "Daddy's working," I said, hating how weak it sounded. "He'll see you soon, baby." But even as I said it, I wondered if it was true. The legal letter had mentioned something about temporary custody arrangements, but I hadn't paid close attention to the details. Now I was starting to worry that Graham might actually try to take Chloe away from me. That evening, my phone rang. Graham's mother, Miriam, had always been polite to me, but I could hear the frost in her voice immediately. Ottilie, I wanted to let you know that Chloe won't be coming for her sleepover this weekend. What? Why not? Chloe loved her grandmother's house, and the weekly sleepovers had been a tradition for years. I think it's best if we keep things simple while you and Graham work through your difficulties. Miriam, this is between Graham and me. It has nothing to do with Chloe. There was a long pause. Doesn't it? From what I understand, she was in the house when you decided to humiliate my son in front of your friends. My face burned. It was a joke. One comment, and suddenly I'm the villain? One comment that apparently ended your marriage, Miriam said quietly. I think that says something about how harmless it really was. She hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. Even Graham's mother was turning against me, painting me as some kind of monster for making one stupid joke. Later that night, after Chloe was in bed, I sat in my empty living room and tried to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. My sister Ellery had texted earlier, asking if I was okay, but I hadn't responded yet. I knew she'd probably heard some version of events from our father, and I wasn't ready for another lecture about being more considerate of Graham's feelings. The house felt enormous without Graham's quiet presence. Even when we weren't talking, he'd always been there, reading in his chair, helping Chloe with homework, loading the dishwasher. Now there was just silence and the growing realization that maybe I'd misjudged how serious this situation really was. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Graham's lawyer, requesting financial records and proposing formal custody mediation. The subject line made my blood run cold. Haim's divorce proceedings. Divorce. The word hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't about space or cooling off. Graham was actually planning to end our marriage over one night, one comment, one moment of poor judgment. I stared at the email until the words blurred together, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. The law office smelled like leather and disappointment. I sat across from Mr. Barlow, Graham's attorney, trying to project confidence while my world crumbled around me. Graham sat beside his lawyer, looking composed in a way that infuriated me. This was the man who used to ask me to order pizza because he was too shy to call himself, and now he was calmly discussing the dissolution of our marriage like it was a business merger gone bad. Mrs. Hames, Mr. Barlow said, his voice professionally neutral, my client is requesting joint custody of your daughter, with primary residence alternating weekly. Absolutely not, I said immediately. Chloe needs stability. She needs her mother. Graham spoke for the first time since we'd sat down. She needs both her parents, and she needs to be protected from any more public humiliation. I felt my cheeks burn. That was one night, Graham. One stupid comment that you've blown completely out of proportion. Have I? He reached into a folder and pulled out his phone. Should I play the recording of what Chloe told the school counselor about Mommy's mean words about Daddy? My stomach dropped. I hadn't known Chloe had talked to anyone about that night, let alone the school counselor. She's 6 years old. She doesn't understand adult conversations. She understood enough to know that Mommy hurt Daddy's feelings in front of everyone, Graham said quietly. She understood enough to ask me why you don't love me anymore. Mr. Barlow cleared his throat. Perhaps we should focus on the practical arrangements. My client has prepared a list of his concerns regarding the current living situation. He slid a document across the table. As I read, my anger grew with each bullet point. Graham was painting me as an unfit mother, citing everything from my pattern of public humiliation to my failure to maintain appropriate boundaries with colleagues. What's that supposed to mean? I demanded. Graham and his lawyer exchanged a look. We'll address that in due course, Mr. Barlow said smoothly. After the meeting, I drove straight to Cassie's apartment, my hands shaking with rage. She opened the door looking uncomfortable, as if she'd been expecting me. "Can you believe this?" I said, waving the legal documents. "He's trying to take Chloe away from me. My own husband is claiming I'm an unfit mother because I made one joke." Cassie let me in, but she didn't offer wine or sympathy like she usually did. "Ottilie, I need to tell you something. Graham's lawyer called me." "What?" "They want me to testify about Saturday night, about what you said and about—" She trailed off, looking miserable. "About what?" "About the things you've said about Graham over the past few months. The complaints, the jokes, the way you talk about him when he's not around." I felt like I'd been slapped. "You're going to testify against me? Your own friend?" "I don't want to get involved in this at all," Cassie said. "But they have screenshots, Ottilie, of our text conversations, the ones where you called Graham pathetic, where you said you were embarrassed to be married to him." The room started to spin. I'd forgotten about those texts, sent in moments of frustration when Graham had annoyed me. They'd seemed harmless at the time, just venting to a friend. Now they were evidence in a custody battle. "Those were private conversations," I said weakly. "Not anymore." Cassie sat down heavily on her couch. "I'm sorry, Ottilie, but I think maybe you need to consider that Graham might have a point. The way you've been talking about him, the affair—" "What affair?" The words came out too quickly, too defensive. Cassie gave me a look that said she wasn't buying my denial. "Dean Roussel, come on, Ottilie. I've seen the way you two look at each other, the late meetings, the secretive phone calls. I'm not stupid." I wanted to keep denying it, but what was the point? If Graham's lawyer had our text messages, they probably had other evidence too. The hotel receipts I'd hidden, the lunch dates I'd claimed were work meetings, the nights I'd come home late with elaborate excuses. "It's not what you think," I said finally. "Then what is it?" "It's complicated. Graham and I have been having problems for months, years maybe. Dean just understands me in a way that Graham never has." "So you decided to humiliate your husband in public and then cheat on him?" "I didn't plan for it to happen this way," I said, hearing how pathetic I sounded. "And I never meant for Chloe to get hurt." But even as I said it, I knew it was too late. The damage was done, and Graham clearly had no intention of forgiving me or working things out. He'd gone from my quiet, unassuming husband to a man with a plan, and I was starting to realize I'd seriously underestimated him. That night, I tried calling my father, hoping for some support, or at least a sympathetic ear. Darren Finch had always been the peacekeeper in our family, the one who stayed neutral in conflicts and helped everyone find common ground. "Dad," I said when he answered, "I need to talk to someone. Graham's trying to take Chloe away from me." There was a long pause. "Ottilie, honey, I heard about what happened. Maybe you should think about whether Graham might have some valid concerns." "Not you too," I said, feeling tears start to build. "Dad, I'm your daughter. Doesn't that count for anything?" "Of course it does. But Chloe is my granddaughter, and right now, I'm more worried about what this is doing to her than I am about taking sides between you and Graham." After he hung up, I sat in my empty house and tried to figure out how I'd become the villain in this story. All I'd done was make one comment, one little joke that maybe went a bit too far. But somehow, that had snowballed into accusations of adultery, emotional abuse, and unfit parenting. The next morning brought another email from Mr. Barlow, this one with an attachment that made my blood run cold. Bank statements showing suspicious withdrawals, credit card receipts from hotels and restaurants I'd claimed were work expenses, and worst of all, dash cam footage from Graham's car showing me meeting Dean at various locations over the past 3 months. Graham had been collecting evidence against me for months, quietly documenting my affair while I'd thought I was being clever. The man I'd dismissed as weak and passive had been building a case that could destroy me. I stared at the evidence of my own betrayal and realized that my little joke hadn't ended my marriage. It had simply been the final straw in a relationship I'd been systematically destroying for months without even realizing it. And now Graham was going to make me pay for every cruel word, every secret meeting, every moment I'd chosen Dean over my own family. The walls were closing in, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I was starting to understand that I might actually lose everything. The custody hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in October. I'd spent the previous week trying to prepare, but nothing could have readied me for the moment Mr. Barlow stood up and began methodically destroying my life in front of a judge. Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence of Mrs. Hames's extramarital affair with her co-worker, Dean Roussel, which has been ongoing for approximately 4 months. The manila folder he opened seemed to contain my entire secret life. Hotel receipts I'd thought were safely hidden, credit card statements showing lunches and dinners I'd claimed were work meetings, and most damning of all, screenshots of text messages between Dean and me that left no doubt about the nature of our relationship. "Missing you already," read one message from Dean, sent at 11:47 p.m. on a night I'd told Graham I was working late. My response, sent 3 minutes later. Same. Can't wait for Thursday's meeting. I watched Graham's face as the evidence was presented. He didn't look angry or hurt anymore, just tired, resigned, like a man who'd finally accepted that the woman he'd married no longer existed. Furthermore, Mr. Barlow continued, we have evidence that Mrs. Hames has been systematically undermining her husband's relationship with their daughter, including telling the child that Daddy left us and suggesting that Mr. Hames abandoned the family. That's not what I said, I interrupted, earning a sharp look from the judge. Mrs. Hames, the judge said calmly, you'll have your opportunity to respond. Please let counsel finish. But there was more. So much more. Graham had recorded conversations, saved voicemails, even documented the nights I'd come home late with alcohol on my breath and lipstick smudged. He'd been building this case for months, probably since long before the dinner party that I'd thought was the catalyst for everything. When it was my turn to speak, I tried to explain myself, to make the judge understand that I wasn't a monster, just a woman who'd made some mistakes, but every word seemed to make things worse. Your Honor, my husband is trying to punish me for one night of poor judgment. Yes, I said something I shouldn't have, and yes, I've made some personal choices I regret, but that doesn't make me an unfit mother. Mrs. Hames, the judge said, looking over her glasses at me, according to the evidence presented, this wasn't one night of poor judgment. This appears to be a pattern of behavior that has created an unstable environment for your daughter. After the hearing, I sat in my car in the courthouse parking lot and called Dean. I needed to hear a friendly voice, someone who would remind me that I wasn't the terrible person Graham was making me out to be. How did it go? He asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Terrible. He had everything, Dean. Every text, every receipt, every lie I told. How did I not know he was watching me so closely? There was a pause. Ottilie, I think maybe we need to cool things off for a while. This whole situation is getting pretty intense, and I don't want to make things worse for you. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. You're abandoning me too? I'm not abandoning anyone. I just think it's best if we step back until your divorce is finalized, for both our sakes. After he hung up, I drove home to an empty house. Chloe was spending the week with Graham, part of the temporary custody arrangement the judge had imposed while the case was pending. The silence was deafening. That evening, my sister Ellery finally called. I'd been avoiding her for weeks, not ready for the lecture I knew was coming. Ottilie, what the hell is going on? Dad told me about the custody hearing, and I just got off the phone with Miriam. She says Graham has evidence of an affair? It's complicated, I said, the same weak response I'd been giving everyone. No, it's not complicated. Either you cheated on your husband or you didn't. Either you humiliated him in front of your friends or you didn't. Which is it? I started to cry then, ugly sobs that I'd been holding back for weeks. I messed up, Ellery. I messed up so badly, and now everyone hates me, and I might lose Chloe, and I don't know how to fix any of it. Oh, honey, she said, her voice softening. Why didn't you just talk to Graham if you were unhappy? Why did it have to come to this? I don't know, I whispered. I don't know when I became this person. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't entirely true. I'd been this person for a while, maybe longer than I wanted to admit. The cruel comments, the secret meetings, the lies, they hadn't happened overnight. I'd been slowly poisoning my marriage for months, maybe years, and I'd been too caught up in my own justifications to see it. The next day brought another blow. Cassie texted to let me know she'd been called to testify, and she wasn't going to lie under oath to protect me. The screenshots of our conversations, where I'd called Graham pathetic and complained about being stuck in a boring marriage, were going to be entered as evidence. I tried calling her, hoping to convince her to at least soften her testimony, but she didn't answer. When I drove to her apartment, she wasn't there. Or maybe she was just pretending not to be home. Either way, I was losing another ally. That night, I sat in Chloe's empty bedroom, surrounded by her stuffed animals and art projects, and tried to remember when I'd last felt truly happy in my marriage. When had Graham's quiet presence started feeling like suffocation instead of comfort? When had I started seeing his kindness as weakness and his love as obligation? I couldn't pinpoint a specific moment, which somehow made it worse. It suggested that my dissatisfaction had been building for years, that I'd been slowly checking out of my marriage without even realizing it. The affair with Dean hadn't been the cause of my problems with Graham. It had been a symptom of something much deeper. My phone buzzed with another email from Mr. Barlow. The subject line made my heart sink. Final settlement offer. Graham was giving me one last chance to settle out of court. Joint custody, me moving out of the family home, and a financial arrangement that would leave me starting over from scratch. It was generous, considering the evidence he had against me, but it also meant admitting that I'd lost everything. I stared at the email for a long time, weighing my options. I could fight it, drag things out in court, and hope that somehow I could convince a judge that I deserved another chance. But the evidence against me was overwhelming, and every day that passed seemed to bring new revelations about just how thoroughly I'd destroyed my own life. Or I could accept that I'd made my choices, and now I had to live with the consequences. Either way, the woman I'd been, the wife, the mother, the person who'd thought she could have everything without paying any price, was gone forever. The mediation room felt like a courtroom, even though it was supposed to be less formal. Graham sat across from me with his lawyer, looking like a different person than the man I'd married 8 years ago. Gone was the uncertainty, the deference to my opinions, the willingness to let me take the lead in every decision. In his place was someone I barely recognized, calm, prepared, and absolutely done with me. Mrs. Hames, the mediator began, your husband's legal team has presented substantial evidence regarding the breakdown of your marriage. Would you like to respond to any of these allegations? I looked at the stack of papers in front of me. Bank statements, hotel receipts, text message screenshots, even photographs of me and Dean taken from Graham's car's dash camera. The evidence was so thorough, so methodically collected, that it painted a picture of a woman I didn't want to recognize as myself. I made mistakes, I said finally. But I'm still Chloe's mother. I'm still the person who's been there for her every day for 6 years. Mr. Barlow leaned forward. Mrs. Hames, were you there for her on the evening of September 15th, when you told a room full of adults intimate details about your husband's body? Were you there for her when she asked her teacher why Mommy says mean things about Daddy? My face burned. She's 6 years old. She doesn't understand. She understands that her mother humiliates her father, Graham said quietly. She understands that you've been lying to both of us for months. She understands that when she asks where Daddy is, you tell her I abandoned her instead of explaining that you're the one who destroyed our family. The words hit me like physical blows. Graham, please, we can work this out. For Chloe's sake, can't we just try to… Work what out? His voice remained steady, but I could see the pain underneath. The affair? The lies? The fact that you've spent months telling anyone who would listen that you're embarrassed to be married to me? I tried a different approach. You're not perfect either, Graham. You're controlling. You never want to go out. You make me feel like I'm suffocating in that house. So you decided to cheat on me and humiliate me publicly instead of talking to me about it? The mediator intervened. Let's focus on the custody arrangements. Mr. Hames, you're requesting joint physical custody with alternating weeks? Yes, Graham said. And I want it on record that if Mrs. Hames continues to make disparaging comments about me in front of Chloe, I'll be seeking full custody. You can't do that, I said, panic rising in my chest. You can't take her away from me. I don't want to take her away from you, Graham replied. I want to protect her from the kind of toxic environment you've created. If you can prove that you're capable of putting her needs before your own anger, then we can make joint custody work. The mediator looked at me expectantly. Mrs. Hames, are you willing to agree to a no disparagement clause regarding your ex-husband? I wanted to scream that it wasn't fair, that Graham was being vindictive, that he was using our daughter as a weapon against me. But looking at the evidence spread across the table, evidence of months of betrayal and cruelty that I couldn't deny, I realized that I was the one who had weaponized our marriage. Fine, I whispered. There's also the matter of the family home, Mr. Barlow continued. Given Mrs. Hames's financial deception and the fact that marital assets were used to fund her extramarital activities, my client is requesting that she vacate the premises within 30 days. That's my home too, I protested. I've lived there for 6 years. You've also used it as a base of operations for your affair, the mediator noted, consulting her papers. According to these phone records, you conducted numerous calls with Mr. Roussel from the family residence, often while your daughter was present. I felt sick. Every lie, every selfish choice, every moment I'd put myself before my family was being exposed under fluorescent lights I couldn't escape, and I had no defense left. I need time to find somewhere to live, I said. You'll have 30 days, Graham replied. That's more than you gave me when you decided to blow up our marriage. Later, sitting in my car, I called my father, hoping for comfort, for someone to take my side. Dad, he's taking everything. Chloe, the house, even my friends. He was silent for a moment. Then, softly but firmly, Ottilie, I love you, but I can't defend what you've done. This isn't one stupid comment. It's months of lies and betrayal. You need to take responsibility and protect your daughter from more damage. That night, Ellery came to help me pack. She wrapped dishes in silence before finally saying, "He loved you. He was good to you." "He was boring," I muttered. "So you destroyed him instead." Her words cut deeper than she knew. The affair had started as flirtation, a way to feel alive again. The insults, the public humiliation, all of it had seemed harmless until it wasn't. Now, standing in the wreckage, I could finally see what I'd done. "What was worth it?" Ellery asked quietly. I looked around the house, our photos, Chloe's toys, the life I'd set on fire. "Nothing," I said. "I have nothing." The next morning, Mr. Barlow's office called to schedule the final signing. Graham's revenge was complete, quiet, lawful, devastating. He hadn't yelled or cursed. He just told the truth, and that had been enough to destroy me. The divorce was finalized on a gray Thursday morning. 8 years of marriage reduced to signatures and paperwork. Graham signed the decree without looking at me, his silence colder than any argument we'd ever had. "The custody arrangement goes into effect immediately," the lawyer said. I nodded. I'd already packed what little I had left of our life into boxes stacked in my small apartment across town. Outside, I called after him. Graham, please, can we talk? He stopped, but didn't turn. What's left to say, Ottilie? That you're sorry now that it's over? I understand what I did was wrong. Do you? Which part? Lying, humiliating me, using our daughter to score points. Take your pick. I understand all of it, I whispered. Good, he said. Maybe next time you'll do better. And then he was gone. That afternoon, I picked up Chloe for our first custody visit. She climbed into my car, clutching a drawing, her and Graham on one side, me alone on the other. I miss our real house, she said softly. This is our real house now, I lied. That night, scrolling through social media, I saw a photo of Graham and Chloe at the pumpkin patch, both smiling, both happy. The comments were full of love for them, none for me. Dean texted, "Hope you're okay." I deleted his number. The next morning, I returned Chloe to Graham's house. She ran to him laughing, her small arms around his neck. "Did you have fun with Mommy?" he asked. "It was okay," she said. I drove home past the bistro where my affair began and realized the cruelest punishment wasn't losing Graham. It was realizing how right he'd been about me. The decree sat on my table, a quiet obituary for the person I used to be. Outside, I could hear other families living ordinary, unbroken lives. I turned off the light and lay down in my empty apartment, knowing that this time, I was the one who'd been left behind. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.